So welcome everyone to the 2024 Boston Marathon Course Review. Again, my name is Paul Carmona, coach for the Rebel online coaching program, the Rebel Boston program. I also coach for the Mesa Marathon, the Portland Marathon, Las Vegas Marathon, and my company Run Train Race. And through those various programs, I've got a number of people who are training for the Boston Marathon. I've been coaching runners, marathoners and half marathoners for 20 years now. And I've run a total of 81 marathons. Boston, I've finished 13 times. So this coming April will be my 14th Boston Marathon. Kristen?
Yes, I'll be doing my 6th Boston Marathon in 15 days. I'm a certified RRCA and VDOT coach, and I'm also a certified personal trainer. So I always recommend people don't skip their strength training. I'm a master's runner. I run for Central Park Track Club here in New York City, where I live, and I am very excited about this race.
Very good. By the way, I coached Kristen to her first Boston Marathon back in 2019. And since then, she's gone on to do great things. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to go over a number of logistics as well as the course, starting with the Expo and then the race morning logistics, which usually there are a lot of questions about. Kristen's going to go mile by mile through the course with some commentary by me, and then I'll cover some of the post-race logistics very quickly. And then we'll leave some time here for questions and answers at the end. The question and answer, the best way to do it is because Kristen is driving the slideshow, she can only see the full screen of the slideshow. I can see the comments, so if there are any questions, post those in the chat and I'll read them back if anyone has got any questions. And let's see. So far I see no questions in the chat. We're going to get rolling here. Starting with the Expo, it's at the Heinz Convention Center. There's the address. You won't have any trouble finding it. It's attached to the Prudential Center, right next to the Sheraton Hotel. It's right on Boylston Street where the marathon finishes. There are security checkpoints at the entrances to get into the convention center. So if you're carrying a bag of any kind, like a backpack, a purse, anything like that, they'll search your bag. If you want to get in and out quickly, don't go in with anything. Don't carry any bags in, and you can just walk through the metal detectors. The easiest way to get to the Expo, other than walking, if you're staying at a nearby hotel, is to take the T. There are 3 T stations nearby. There's the Heinz Convention Center station, the Prudential Center station, and the Copley station, all on the green line. So as you're working your way around Boston using the T, a lot of people use it quite a bit. Look for the green lines to get to the Expo. They're the Expo hours, Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Plenty of time to get to the Expo any of those days. The least crowded time is usually in the middle of the afternoon or late afternoon, like 4:30, 5 o'clock. The most crowded, obviously, is when it first opens. The finish line is just a few blocks from the Expo on Boylston Street. And by the way, you can't, it's not shown in this graphic here, but if you're at the Expo and you walk out on the mall side, the Prudential Center mall side, you can walk through the mall to get to a mall exit that's closer to the finish line than walking straight down Boylston Street. Usually the fastest way to get somewhere is a straight line, a point, but depending on the time that you go, and we'll show you a photo in a little while, but Boylston Street can be very crowded and it's difficult to get from one point to the other. There's lots of merchandise, photo ops, panels, and clinics going on at the Expo. So you just check the website or check the information that the BAA sends to you, and you can get an idea of what time things are happening. There are additional options at FanFest. Unfortunately, FanFest has moved this year because Copley Square is closed for construction. That's right next to the Boston Public Library. It's moved over to City Hall, One City Hall. It's a bit of a distance to get there. It's not the shortest walk, so you're going to want to check for T transportation to get there. But the good news is that there's a lot of stuff happening. So if you make your way over to City Hall, Dick's Sporting Goods has got some things for sale. There's a Samuel Adams tent and lots of other things going on at the Fan Fest. I usually go there at least once. Be prepared for crowds. As I mentioned, there's the Boylston Street entrance to the convention center. The other one is inside the Prudential Center Mall. Depending on which side you go in, it's usually a little more crowded, and the more crowded one is the street side on Boylston Street. So if you go through the mall, it's usually a little bit less crowded. But Boylston Street is also heavily barricaded. You see that bicycle fencing in the photo? That bicycle fencing runs the entire length of Boylston Street along the sidewalks, and it keeps people from crossing only at the crosswalks. And so you can see the people waiting to cross the Boylston Street there. As you work your way down the road, the crowds get very, very thick. So walking along the sidewalks can be a bit tough at times. Packet pickup when you go in is pretty simple. We've all done plenty of races, and you know the drill. You got to show your ID. You'll get a digital pickup pass in the mail in your email in early April. And of course, you have to pick up your own packet when you go there. Just bring your ID, show them your ID, and you'll pick up your packet, and then move on into the expo. Expo, like most others, large exhibit space, a lot of vendors. It's not as big as some of the others. I just got back from Tokyo when my wife ran the Tokyo Marathon, and that expo was huge, multi-level. This one is not as big as it used to be. So if you're someone who attended the Boston Marathon, say even as recently as 4 or 5 years ago, it's not what it used to be. It's not as crowded and it's not as big. The reason why is a lot of the vendors now have their own exhibits on Newbury Street, which is just a couple of blocks north of Boylston Street. You can find Newbury Street pretty easily. And all up and down Newbury Street, you'll see everything from, well, you name it, Saucony, Adidas, not Adidas, but Saucony and other other brands will have pop-ups on Newbury Street. So be sure, as I say, when I say go first thing, I don't mean first thing in the morning, but your first available option, the time that you have. Go to the expo, get it out of the way. Again, it's not what it used to be. I used to be able to spend an hour and a half walking around the expo, hitting all these different vendors because it would be giant displays by all the different major brands. Well, now there's one, and it's Adidas. And some of the others, I have to say, and I'll be completely honest here, some of the other exhibitors, it puzzles me why they're there, like hair extensions and leaf guards, dog food. There are things like that in the expo, and I wondered why isn't there more running stuff in here? And the reason why is because their major sponsor, which was Adidas, and others essentially excluded other vendors from being in there. So if you want to go to Marathon Sports, you used to be able to go to the Marathon Sports booth in the expo. No longer. Now you've got to go to Marathon Sports on Boylston Street or their pop-up over on Newbury Street if you want to hit that store. Okay, so just don't wear your legs out walking back and forth from the expo to Newbury Street. Go to the expo, get what you need, head over to the pop-ups on Newbury Street, spend an hour or so walking up and down the street, and you'll basically get everything you need. Let's move on to race morning. So far, I don't see any questions. If you've asked a question or you want to raise your hand, you can do that, and I'll keep an eye on that. Race morning, gear check, and buses to the start. I've seen it on Facebook, a lot of questions, a lot of confusion about this. It's really not that complicated. Bottom line, be prepared for an hour-long ride from bus pickup to the start, and bring with you only your personal item bag or the clothing that you have on. Throwaway clothing typically. Old shoes, it depends on the weather. If it's wet at all, it's a good idea. I did this in 2018. I brought an old pair of shoes, wore them around because it was very muddy and everything got really wet. And I waited to change my shoes. I carried them in a bag. And they did make an exception that year. A lot of people were carrying grocery bags, plastic grocery bags with their shoes in them. They made an exception and let you carry those on. And I waited to change my shoes till I was in the corral, literally in the corral, waiting to start the race. Yeah, my shoes were going to get wet, but they would have been not just wet, but muddy wet if I hadn't changed my shoes. Let's see, what else do we have here? Everything you plan to race with, gels, headphones, you name it, obviously you're going to bring those with you. As far as the gear tech itself, it's the map location will show you here. They're the drop hours, 5:45 to 9:15. The pickup hours 11:36. It's pretty simple. You're going to drop your bag on the way to bus pickup, and you're going to pick up your bag after the race. That's the bottom line. Here's an example of what the bag is. The size of it is pretty good sized bag. They're going to give you a sticker when you pick up your packet. You put the sticker onto your bag, corresponds to your bib number, and you can't take the bag with you on the bus. And yes, they will not accept any other bags except this one. So um, take your bag with you using the one that they give you. Here's what you can carry onto the bus. It's a 1 gallon clear plastic bag. It doesn't say Revel on the bag. That's my shirt that I'm wearing. You can see through the bag. That's it. A 1 gallon bag. That's what you can carry. Usually about a banana, maybe a bottle of Gatorade, your gels, unless you carry them in your pockets. That's all you can carry with you on the bus. You can't carry anything else. Again, the exception they made one year when it was pouring down rain is carrying shoes.
You can, I'll just say one thing. You can, anything you can put on your person, you should. Like if you want to have a blanket, just wrap the blanket around you over your shoulders. It's fine. It doesn't have to go in the bag, right? So if you want to have a trash bag and extra kinds of things to stay warm, layer all of that on you and keep it on your person. And that's how you get that through. Okay.
But not a backpack.
Correct, not a backpack.
They won't let you on with a bag. All of these changes, by the way, happened after 2013. Understandable. I was there in 2013, and a couple of backpacks on the street did a lot of damage. So all those changes were made then. The bus loading. Here's a map. We use old maps for this presentation because they have better detail than the existing maps. You can see gear check on Boylston Street just to get your orientation. This is north-south, right? So north is at the top of the map. East is to the right. The finish line is over on the left, where you see it says finish line. Just a couple of blocks away is gear check, and there are buses staged on the street, and the buses have numbers on them that correspond to your bib number. So it'll be, for example, 14,000 through 15,000, and you find the bus. If your number is 14,001, that's your bus. And you go up to that bus, you hand them the bag through the window, they take your bag, and then off you go walking another block east on Boylston Street to Charles Street, where the buses are staged. There are checkpoints on the north and the south ends of Charles Street, and you can't get in to the actual loading area until your bus loading time. So let's say you're in the wave 2, you have a white bib, and your bus loading time is 7:30 in the morning. If you show up there at 7 o'clock, you're going to have to wait outside the loading area for 30 minutes until they start letting the white bibs into the loading area. And so if you're late and you're wearing a red bib, yes, you can go on and they'll let you on to get onto a bus, and hopefully you're there soon after your bus loading time. The last bus leaves at 9:30, and again, there are plenty of porta potties. So show up close to the time that you are supposed to load. Just right around where that red circle is, it says AM bus loading. That there's a whole lot of porta potties. Be sure to hit one before you get on the bus, because again, these are school buses. And onto the next slide, you will see it is a long bus ride to the start. There's Boston Commons, where the buses load. You head down the highway, and there's Hopkinton over on the left, and you can see there it shows, according to this map, it's a 46-minute drive. So it's about an hour long, because the route that the buses take, they head west, southwest, then they head south. They actually bypass Hopkinton to the south and then come up north on that little 2-lane road going into Hopkinton. And at times the buses start backing up, and it's a little bit of a wait. So again, it's a little more than an hour. The Athletes Village is actually a little bit southwest of the center of Hopkinton, where the race begins. You get to the Athletes Village, you've got a relatively long wait. Be prepared to sit outside or maybe under some of the tents. If you're riding a school bus, they're going to drop you off and leave you there. If you're riding a charter bus, and there are a few people who might be, there are different clubs that have charters, charity groups have charters. I'm in the Unicorn Club. The Unicorn Club has its own bus. And so if you're on a charter bus, that's a little bit different story. They don't leave you out there. You can usually stay on the bus. But the school buses, which I have ridden before, drop you off at either the middle school or the high school and leave you there. So you're sitting outside on the grass or under the tents. They do have water and Gatorade, lots of porta potties, and this welcome sign. It all starts here. There's me and Kristen one of the years we ran Boston. So if you want a picture, carry your phone with you. It means you have to carry it with you in the race. Hold on a second. We have a couple of comments. Can you wear old runners and bring your race runners tied around? Yes, that was a question we've already answered about wearing your old shoes and wear them and bring them with you.
I
Last 2
recommend
years,
that.
Sue says the last 2 years my school bus got lost and missed your corral start. Yeah, no waiting at the porta john. Yeah, so the good thing, the best thing to do is to get to your bus loading time. We'll go back there. We don't have to go back in slides, but going back to the bus loading, get there a few minutes before your bus loading time, and then just be patient. There'll be a lot of crowds. Get into line, get on bus, and get there as soon as you can. If you know the way, maybe keep. I usually try to sit up to the front near the buses, and I have my phone with me, and I follow it on a map. And occasionally, I've actually spoken to a driver, not at Boston, but other races, and said, I think we're supposed to turn that last left turn. And I've had a driver say, oh, did I miss the turn? Yes, and turn around and went back. That was a Revel race. Okay, so take your phone with you to the start if you want to get a photo. It all starts here. And but be prepared for crowded, long lines. There's usually a long line at this sign. You can find it pretty easily. You'll see this long line of people standing in the middle of the field. And the way that it works is you get into line, you work your way up. Recently, they've had a volunteer who takes your phone, takes a picture, hands you your phone back. I don't know if they're going to do that this year. In the past, the way it worked is the person in front of you handed you their phone, you took a picture of them, and then you handed your phone to the person behind you. They took your picture and so on. That's how it worked in the past. This is an aerial view of the Athletes Village. The top square white roof below the water towers, that's Hopkinton Middle School. At the bottom is Hopkinton High School. Below that, out of the picture, you can't see it, is Hopkinton Elementary School. The Athletes Village are the two fields adjacent to the two schools, and you can see the tents there. But those tents they're large, but they're not large enough to provide cover if it's raining for everybody. And so that's why I say be prepared to sit outside. Now, in that photo, you see the tent in the lower parking lot. That's no longer grass. That used to be a grass field. Now it's a parking lot. And so there is no tent there. Now it's nothing but porta potties. It's just it's a giant parking lot full of porta potties. And this graphic shows you a little bit better. You can see the lower field. It's all porta potties. There is some water and some Gatorade tables there. And then in the upper field, there's a couple of tents, recycling, first aid, information booths, and so on. Just to orient you, the bus drop-offs are, you can see them. There's the middle school at the top, high school at the bottom, the two fields, upper and lower, and the runner drop-offs when you arrive. And there's me and Kristen at the arrival one year. The buses arrive on that street that I mentioned, the buses line up on, and they'll either turn left to go onto that road that goes by the high school, or turn into the middle road that drops off between the middle school and the high school. And it's just random where your bus goes. The traffic control folks will direct the buses to one or the other. And you can see the two drop-offs right in front of the school or in the back of the school. The important issue here is that depending on where you're dropped off, you're either going to walk towards the two schools past the porta potties, or between the two schools towards the two fields. And there's a choke point that's created by this right there. You got runners coming off the buses from the east side of the road, that's the east side of the schools, and runners unloading on the west side of the road, and they're walking along, and there's a big choke point. In addition to that, what's not shown here, that road you see at the bottom where it says Loop Road, that road goes to the elementary school. And if you're on a charter bus, and even if none of us here on a charter bus, those charter buses park in that parking lot at the elementary school. And so all the runners who are sitting on the charter buses walk up that road, by the way, through security to get into the Athletes Village. You walk up that road, and then you walk up that sidewalk between the yellow field and the high school. And you've now created a third traffic flow, which is all the people walking up between the high school, the field of porta potties, the left hand unloading, the right hand unloading, big choke point. And why am I mentioning this? It's because throughout the morning, there are announcements that will say, right now, if you're wearing a red bib, it's time to head to the exit. You see the exit at the top, there's only one exit. And Everybody lines up there to exit the field. And if you are in the lower parking lot or in the charter buses, and you hear the announcement that it's time to go load, it's time for your wave to start walking to the start, you've got to walk through all these crowds at that choke point, all the crowds that are lining up by the middle school, and head to that exit at the start. In the meantime, while you're waiting there, what you're doing is you're eating, you're drinking, you're queuing for the toilets, and then you're getting another drink and getting back in line for the porta potties. Bringing something to sit on, a towel, a heat sheet, a trash bag is a good idea. Those are easy. You put a trash bag in your pocket, and fold it up, put it in your pocket, carry it with you, unfold it, put it on the grass, and you've got a place to sit. And even if it's not raining, the morning dew, you end up with getting very wet. Again, it's very crowded exit. Just be patient, but plan for delays. Know what time it is you're supposed to exit to the start, and you'll hear the announcements. It'll say, white bibs wave 2, your exit is at X time. You'll hear that announcement and think, okay, that's 15 minutes from now. I better start walking that way now because it's going to take me 15 minutes to get to the exit. Discard your clothes as late as possible. Another thing that creates a lot of traffic at this choke point is along the way, near the exit, people start taking off their sweatpants and their sweatshirts and start changing their shoes and so on. And you don't need to do that because there are volunteers all the way down Grove Street as you walk to the start, and volunteers on both sides of the corral standing there with clear trash bags for clothes, dark trash bags for trash. You can literally change your clothing in the corral. But in the meantime, as you're waiting in the Athletes Village, you've got thousands of new friends. There's a photo of a very nice year. That was 2016, I think. It was sunny and warm. I was sitting out there in short sleeves and shorts, and it was a warm day, and it was clear skies, and it was beautiful just sitting out on the grass. In 2018, it was a different story. It was cold. It was in the 30s. It was raining. There's the Athletes Village, and you can see why bringing another pair of shoes was a good idea, because just walking to get to the start, by the time you got down to the start line, your shoes were a muddy mess. So good idea to bring a different pair of shoes that year. Remember, again, you cannot leave the Athletes Village until they call your wave and your corral. So, for example, they'll say wave 2, corrals 1, 2, and 3, it's time for you to exit. And then they won't let you out unless your bib says wave 2, corral 1, 2, or 3. If you're an earlier wave, like you're a red bib and you're running late, they'll let you go. You can see where the exit is again, and then you walk that yellow line down Grove Street to the start line. It's about 3/4 of a mile. It'll take you 15-20 minutes to get there. And there are more porta potties at the CVS parking lot before you load into the corrals. A lot of them. So you can head into that parking lot, hit the porta potties one last time before you get there. You can see the corrals are on Main Street, and those are loaded pretty efficiently. And again, there'll be volunteers checking your bib number, making sure you're loading into the right corral. Just be patient. You see a lot of people trying to shove their way into the corrals. It's not a good idea. Just wait. You'll get in the corral. Again, the walk time is from the Athletes Village is about 15 to 20 minutes, 3/4 of a mile to get there. Once again, plenty of volunteers collecting clothes and trash. And as far as the corrals go, you can move back, but not up. So if you're in corral 3 and a friend of yours is in corral 4, your friend can't move up to 3, but you can move back to 4. Same thing with waves. Let's say you're in wave 1, last corral, and you got a friend running in wave 2, second corral. Your friend, you can move back to the other wave and run with your friend in the second corral, but you can't move to the front wave of a corral of a wave behind you. Perfect example. Let's say you're in the last corral of wave 1, and you'd rather be in the first corral of wave 2 so that you have clear road in front of you. You can't do that. You can only move back to the second corral of the wave behind you. All right. Once again, there's the loading schedule. The exit to the village. So the time to exit the village, the very first group leaves at 9:15. They're in corrals 1 and 2. So you can see it's 30 to 45 minutes before each wave start time. So the last corrals of wave 1 leave at 9:30. That's corral 7, 8, 9, and it's a 10 a.m. start time. That leaves you about 15 minutes or so, maybe 10 to 15 minutes waiting in the corral. So by the time you walk down there, you got a couple of minutes to hit the porta potties, and then it's time to get in the corral and it's time to go. This is a photo I took. I think this was 2016. I don't remember what year it was. Walking to the start. Just relax and enjoy this walk. It's the walk from the Athletes Village to down Grove Street to the corral. And you can see the fencing on the side of the road. It's fencing on both sides of the road. Don't try to jump through the fencing to duck out to bushes or anything like that. There's a lot of law enforcement along the way. And of course, the neighbors are out. They're out greeting you. It's really nice to see the neighbors coming out wishing you good luck. There are a few of the neighbors that put out tables that have everything from Vaseline to Band-Aids to bottles of water, you name it. People put stuff out and you can help yourself and thank the locals for supporting the Boston Marathon.
I say one thing about this. Sometimes you'll see people trying to warm up here. I don't recommend this area for a warm up. It's really obnoxious because people are trying to get from point A to point B, and you running back and forth and doing your drills and things in this area is a big point of congestion, and you're in people's way. If you really do want to do a nice warm up or some drills, the place to do that is beside the corrals when they're lined up in barriers on Main Street, and there's a side that's open all the way to the right where you can do some strides back and forth.
Good point. Again, there's the times for the race starts. Another thing I'll mention, I forgot to mention it earlier, and you see in the middle of the photo where it says CBS Pharmacy and all the porta potties. There is a table in there, and the photo here is a cup of water. There is water there, and I think the sport drink Gatorade. But the other nice thing that's there is a take one, leave one table, meaning if you forgot a gel or any gels, you can go to that table. And some people think, oh, I showed up with way too many gels, I'm going to leave these here. There's everything from power bars to gels to you name it. I've seen pairs of gloves out there. And so people will leave stuff on this table instead of throwing it in the trash or throwing it on the ground, obviously. They leave it on these tables. And so I've gone up there and said, oh, a chocolate Cliff Bar. I'm going to eat that chocolate chip Cliff Bar. So I just take it and I have it right there right before I get into the corral. Yes, I actually will eat a Cliff Bar right before I start running the Boston Marathon. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, and she's going to walk us through the course in sections.
Great. So here we are with the overall elevation profile, and I have the course map here. I'm going to break it down into 5K sections, excluding the Newton Hills. Newton Hills will be, I will do that in its entirety. So that's a 10K section. If you're wondering why I chose the 5Ks, there's a couple of reasons. One is that this is not a course where you want to compare 1 mile to the next mile. So because there's great variations in elevation, and we're going to go through that. So 1 mile might have a 100-foot drop, and then the next mile will have a 100-foot climb, right? So trying to compare those one-to-one is not a great way of pacing or strategy. And the other part is that the course, in terms of your chip and your tracker and your timing splits, will come back with those 5K broken down. So you can use that afterwards. If you've done the Boston Marathon before, you have that as a reference point. So I like to use these 5Ks because, again, it's a nice chunk and a nice kind of grouping to think about the course. The course runs from west to east, and it goes through 8 towns. In terms of the wind, there is most often a headwind, and that it means winds from the east. However, there are exceptions to that. Most notably, the exception to that would be in 2011, when the world record at that time, 2:03, was set on the Boston Marathon course due to a very large tailwind. I have yet to have a tailwind in Boston, but I'm hopeful that one day I will get there. I think we can all benefit from a little wind at our backs, right? So here's the 8 towns: Hopkinton, Ashland, Framingham, Natick, Wellesley, Newton, Brookline, and then finally Boston. I like to know what the towns are because there's town signs as you enter, and I like to count them off in my head. It gives me some, motivation and excitement as I get closer and closer. There are water and lemon lime endurance Gatorade. It's located at every mile on the course, starting at mile 2. These aid stations are located on both sides of the street. They are long, they are plentiful. Volunteers, there's hundreds of them, thousands of them. You really don't have to worry about not getting water. If you want water, you'll have more than enough opportunity. There are 3 Martin gel stations located on the course. That's starting at mile 11.8, mile 17, and then mile 21.5. They do have both versions of the gel. So there's the caffeinated that comes in a white package, and then there's the non-caffeinated that comes in the black package. Again, there'll be tons of volunteers handing these out on both sides of the street. So if that's something that you want, if you're not carrying your own, then you will certainly have enough access to that. All right, now we're going to go into the course. I'm going to go over the elevation, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things scenic wise or, logistics wise you may want to know about the course. The course is a net downhill, but there is plenty of climbing. So sometimes people think, well, it's downhill. How hard could it be? The course loses 1,275 feet, but there is a gain of 815 feet. So again, as I said, there's a significant amount of climbing. The net of that is 460 feet downhill at the end. And for those who live in New York and run New York City Marathon has 810 feet of elevation, so they are comparable in the gain. This is the first 5K of the course, so that's the start to mile 3.1, and you start in Hopkinton and you run to Ashland. So that's the course. It's very, very narrow here. The lane, it's a 2-lane roadway. There is no shoulder. You will see a lot of people, particularly if you're in wave 1, who will do a little wacky things that I don't recommend. Well, they are in such a hurry, they'll wander off into like the woods on the side to try to get around people because they're so anxious. That is not something I recommend. It is very tight here. You should expect to start out slow, but that's okay. That's an okay way to start a marathon.
Something you mentioned earlier that's particularly pertinent here is the aid stations on both sides of the road. So if you come up and you're on, let's say, the left side of the road and you see the aid station coming up on your right, just stay where you are. It's almost impossible to cut across all those people because the next aid station will be coming on the left side of the road, and they stagger them, right? And so it's not like both aid stations start at the same time. They're always staggered. So one will start before the other one. So if you're on one side of the road and see the aid station, just stay where you are. You don't have to cross the road. And by the way, I've seen people, the spectators are usually right up on the curb, the edge of the road watching. At some points there's fencing keeping the spectators back. At other points there's no fencing. So the spectators are lined up cheering. And I've seen runners do exactly what Kris was talking about. Well, they'll go up on the sidewalk and they're running parallel to the race, the rest of us, behind the spectators. And that's a terrible idea because you never know when a 2-year-old is going to just turn around and run out in front of you. And if you're blazing along and you trip, your marathon ended at mile 2.
Yes. And that ties into this last point here, which is don't waste energy trying to get around people. The entire theory behind running a good marathon is conservation of energy because you need every bit of energy to get yourself through the race itself. And spending your energy trying to save 0.05 seconds going around a person or 3 people or 4 people it's not worth it in the end. So I really don't recommend that. Just know you're going to start out with people all around you, shoulder to shoulder, and it's okay. It's fine. There's a lot of race ahead of you. This is what the close-up detail of this first mile is. I want you to know that there's a 140-foot drop here, and this is the largest single drop of the course. It comes in mile 1. Just so everybody knows, because you'll hear 800 times, 800 million times, people say, don't go out too fast. I agree with that. I do agree with that. However, the largest single drop of the course is in this mile. So if you're a little bit faster than what your target pace is, that's okay. Just don't hammer it. Just go with what gravity and the course is taking you. Go with that. Don't hammer it, and you're going to be fine. Here too is another example that you can carry over into the rest of the course. So within that first mile, you have that huge drop, as I said, and then there's immediately a climb. That's a climb 40 feet there. So it's not large, but every bit of this course is up and down and up and down. So you give and you take and you give and you take. And that's one of the hardest things about mastering this course is knowing when to give and when to take. You're going to have to do a lot of feeling it out, and we're going to go through it, but please do know that that's an example of the way this race is. So once you do that first up and down there, it's overall downhill through that third mile, and you lose about 100 feet there. But again, you can see from that close-up elevation that there is some up going on there as well. All right, 5K to 10K. This is Ashland to Framingham.
Hey, Kris, I have another comment here.
Yes.
Going back to what you were just saying about going with the flow is for most people, everybody I think understands this, is that your corral is made up of people who qualified at the same time you did, right? And so if you're still running that pace, if you qualified with a 330, you're in there with a lot of people who qualified around 330, 331, 329, all 330 people. And for the most part, they're all going to go out about that pace. And so if you go with the flow and just stay with the crowd, and I've seen the questions, are there pacers in the Boston Marathon? No, everybody in your corral is your pacer. The exception to that is this, and it applies to me and I'm sure other people. I'm running a marathon this coming weekend, 9 days before Boston. And I'm not going to run, and I rarely run Boston at the pace where I qualified. So everybody ends up leaving me behind, which is okay with me. I don't have a psychological problem with that. If you're someone who's like, well, I'm not so sure I can control myself, you're concerned, you know you're going to run slower, move back to another wave, move back to another corral. There's nothing wrong with it. I've moved back an entire wave where I'm in wave 2, corral 4, because I ran like a 3:18, right? And I thought I'm going to run 4:18 at Boston. I moved back to wave 3, corral 2, because I'm in no hurry. I'm just going to go with the flow, and so that's okay to do that. In 2018, year we had the really bad weather and the rain, the headwind. The entire wave behind me caught me. And so again, I'm driving the point home that if you're planning to run a hard race and you know your pace and it's about what you qualified at, just go with the flow. You've got a lot of people around you running the same pace. But if you know you're not going to, there's nothing wrong with moving back to another corral, another wave, if you plan to run slower. Thanks.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to look at this next 5K. This section is pretty gentle as far as those rollers go. The road does twist and curve many times. There's not a lot of straight lines, paths here. There's the elevation is never straight either, so it kind of matches. There are a few places where the road widens, and there are medians in the middle, so you need to be aware of that. For the most part, this whole first 10K is a 2-lane road, and there's a couple of sections where a third lane appears and a median appears. You will see it ahead of you, but please always keep keep your eyes up and pay attention to what's going on so you're not caught off guard by that. Oh, I just said that. Okay. Mile 3 to 4 loses about 50 feet. So again, not too much. The grade here is negative 1.4%. And then there's a short uphill climb at mile 4.2, which is a positive 1.7%. So again, this is a perfect example. You get that downhill, but that's followed immediately by an uphill. And so that is the way this course is going to continue throughout. Then there's a nice tiny downhill after that, after you hit the 5-mile marker. The next 10K, this is Framingham to Natick. That is there. This is where the road widens. You enter into the Framingham Business District. So you start out on a very tiny country road where there's really not any businesses to speak of. And then you go into the business district. So the road does widen. There are a lot of crowds. You run right by the Framingham train station, which is on the commuter rail line. And if you have spectators who do want to see you at the beginning of the course, this is a perfect place because it'll let them out right on the course itself. And even if it's not your spectator, you're going to see a lot of spectators in this area because it is so easy to get to. There is a place here where the train tracks cross the course, and you really want to be careful about this. Make sure you put your feet up and don't go down. This is at mile 6.5. I have a picture of it coming up. So this is what this Framingham train depot looks like. And you can see the roadway here. You can see that people have a little bit of room to move. So this is approximately at the 10K of the course. Again, I really encourage everybody to be patient. 10K into a marathon is not that far. There's still a lot of race left. So it's okay if you have, been a little bit boxed in, or you felt like maybe you couldn't open up your stride in that first part. It's fine. A lot of race left. And you're going to want to make your moves when it's easier to run and you have space to do so, right? So this is a point where you have that. This is an example of where those train tracks cross. This is an actual picture of the direction you will be facing when you come across it. It does cut a diagonal here. So again, make sure you just pick your feet up. You don't want to get snagged on that. You don't want to fall down. The next 10K, this is Framingham to Natick. This is
the next 5K.
Oh yeah, the next 5K, sorry. And there's a very few elevation changes here. This is the flattest section of the course, so enjoy it. It is 5K long and that is it. But this is a really good section. This is about where you should feel like you're settling in to your race pace. You're settling into the race itself, and make sure you're getting, really comfortable with the people around you, fueling properly, and, good form. So here we have arrived to Natick, 15K to 20K. The surroundings here really change, and I think, this is not one of those courses that is quote unquote scenic. There's not a lot of highlights in terms of things to see, but you'll notice different towns you go through and different vibes. At mile 9, you pass this lake. I'm not going to be able to say it, so I'm not even going to try. But it's on the left, and there are really good pictures here. It's very kind of peaceful and quiet, so I like to tune into that as you go. Right, there are points on this race where it's almost sensory overload, and then there's other points where it's a little bit quiet, and at mile 9 there is one of those points. So it's good to sort of look inwards there and make sure you're where you want to be race wise. Then you get to the Natick Common at mile 10, and again, this is like you're going through little pockets of towns, pockets of ponds and lakes and things like that. So There's another quiet section before you get to Wellesley at mile 11.6. By mile 12, you can hear the Scream Tunnel ahead. I think most people have at least heard the concept of Scream Tunnel. This is one of the most famous parts of the Boston Marathon and is one of the most exciting parts of the Boston Marathon. And it is one of those points where I mentioned sensory overload. That is one of those points where it comes in to play. It's almost deafening, the Scream Tunnel. That's why it's called that. But you can hear it a long time before you can see it. So you just hear the sounds. You don't even necessarily know what's ahead until you get there.
Yeah, and it's not an actual tunnel. It's called the Wellesley Scream Tunnel. It's made by the Wellesley students, women's college, coming out and screaming very loudly. I think it's matched. We haven't gotten there on the course yet. Quite a bit by the Boston College Scream Tunnel. It's pretty close. Boston College is pretty loud too because you added men and more alcohol to the mix by that late in the race. But going back to a point Kristen made, is that it really is, this race is a bunch of different races all in one and in many different facets. One of them being you go from small town to small town to small town, and the crowds they're thin in between, not very many people, not much cheering. It's really quiet. And then you start getting to town and the crowds start growing. You get to the center of town, they're really big, and then they start thinning as you leave town again, and then it's quiet again, and then it starts growing again. That aspect starts changing right around mile 20, 21. From there in through Brookline and in Boston, the crowds just keep growing and growing and growing. But the early part of the race before you get to Newton, it really goes from sparse crowds to really big, loud, enthusiastic crowds to small, to sparse, to big and enthusiastic again. And one of the nice things about Boston is no matter where you are in the race, the crowds treat you like you are leading the Olympic marathon. They cheer for you, and if you interact with the crowds, they will cheer for you. So if you raise your fist, pump your fist, wave at the crowds, they'll cheer for you. So I make it a point to high five a lot of spectators at various points, and kids too.
Yes. Well, I'll just keep going on that topic, but whatever you have on your shirt or your hat, they will yell that and call that back at you. So if you have a place to put your name, they will call that. If you have something like, if you just have Boston on your shirt, they're going to cheer, "Hey, Boston." Whatever your shirt says, they're gonna try to get that. They're gonna be individualized in their cheering. So that is something to know as well. I've worn different hats. They always pick up on whatever your hat says. So these are things to know. If you want individualized cheers, make something, so they can call it out. In terms of this elevation here, we're going to go back to that. So there's this steady rolling rise to mile 11.25. You can see it there. It's just an overall gain, slow, gradual there. It's about 50 feet over that 1.25 miles. So again, nothing huge, but you will notice it. You will feel it. You're going to feel all of the things on this course, right? This is one of the things that again, makes it challenging because your legs are in great demand. Your legs are having to power a lot of up, a lot of down, a lot of changes in muscles being used. And then you have this rolling drop to mile 13. So up and the down, the up and the down. We are here, Natick to Wellesley. And this is where the Scream Tunnel comes. We sort of got to it a little early because it is very exciting, but there is nothing else quite like it. That is 100% true. If you really want to engage with the Wellesley crowd, stick to the right side. You'll get high fives. You can get kisses. You can get, I don't know, you name it. That's all the way to the right. If you want to avoid some of that, move to the left, because on the left side is where the commuter rail is, and there's just the rail and fields and trees on that side. So it's completely quiet on that side, although obviously you can still hear. Here's some pictures. Oh yeah, keep that. This is an important point. really do keep your pace in control here because it's so easy to get carried away by the hype and the enthusiasm. You won't even notice it. You won't do it on purpose. It won't be a conscious decision. You will just all of a sudden start going 15, 20 seconds faster than you should be at that point in the race. So really do make an effort to slow yourself down and pull yourself back. Here are some pictures. The pictures really don't even do it justice. It is, you'll experience it when you get there. But this picture here on the upper my right side, you can see there that all the cheering and all the kissing and high fives, that's over to one side, and then the other side is just field and quiet. So if that's something you want to avoid, I've done it differently in various years depending upon how I'm feeling. Sometimes I just shoot right down the middle because I kind of just want to mix. But you have all the options here. Now we're on to the next part. And this is one of those sections that you're going to remember because this is the second largest drop in the course. This is 118 feet. This is as you're leaving Wellesley and you're entering into Lower Newton Falls. This drop is, you're going to definitely know it and see it and feel it because it is one of those, it's a visual drop that you can see in front of you. And this is a negative 3.4% grade here. After this drop is where the climbing happens. So you want to use this part to make sure your head and your mental game are on top of what you have ahead of you, because the next 5 miles of this course are some of the hardest miles of any course most of us will ever run. But use this section, use this drop. Again, just go with the flow. This is not hammering at all because you still have 10 miles to race, right? So you're just letting the course take you. You're not pushing. All right, we are to Newton. And as I said, we're going to take this all in one section. This is where this is on the course, 25K to 35K. This is known as the Newton Hills. There are 4 Newton Hills. Heartbreak Hill is the 4th one, the last one. It's the most well-known. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. It is definitely, something to be taken seriously, but really I want everybody to think of the hills in total and not just isolate Heartbreak Hill, because your success is going to depend on getting up all 4 of these. They're all challenging in different ways. They're all in succession, and they're all here in this later half of the race. And that's one of the things that frankly makes this the most difficult, is where it comes in the race and not the hills themselves. Because if you were tackling these hills in the first 10K, you probably wouldn't even notice them. But again, we're looking here at miles 16 to 22, and you're going to notice these climbs. We're going to look at it in great detail. So the hills have names, all of them, but the first one is Washington Hill. This is going over a highway overpass, and that's I-95. Then there's this Brayburn Hill, which is the second one, John Kelly Hill, third, and Heartbreak Hill, the 4th. Everybody knows that one. These are the grades of these hills. So it's a 2.2, the first, the second is 4.1, the third is 2% grade, and then the 4th here is back to a 4% grade. I'm going to give you the feet for all of these because some of you may not be used to dealing with grades. So this first hill, it's a 0.65 miles long. So basically a little over 800 meters, right? And that's a 75-foot gain. The second one, this is a short, steep hill. We have 0.35, so that's a little over 400 meters, right? So that's a 75-foot gain. So you're climbing the same elevation in both of those, but the second one is in half the distance, right? So again, this is a short steep. That's the way you think of that. This third hill is 0.6 miles distance, and it's a gain of 63 feet. And then the last climb is 0.45 miles, and that's 95 feet. So that is the biggest and the, the biggest climb, and it's a little over half a mile long, right? We can make comparisons between all of these climbs, but for me personally, I think of it in the grades because it's just easier number wise. So it's 2, 4, 2, 4. And again, this is the way you can think of it is how steep it is and how long or how short it is, right? These are the times at various paces for how long it's going to take you to get up these hills. I like to point this out just to show that even though it's a really important part of the race, it's not that long. Even if you slow way down and you're barely able to get up the hill, right? And you're doing, let's say, 10-minute mile and you're going up Heartbreak Hill, that's 5 minutes. That's it. 5 minutes in the course of a 3, 4, 5-hour race. Everybody can do this. We're going to suffer, but we're all going to suffer together and it's going to be okay. Because again, these are you want to make sure your brain is wrapped around it. You want to make sure you've paced yourself well up to this point. That's going to help you get up these hills. Hopefully you've done some really solid hill training as you've prepared for this race. That's going to help you get up these hills. But we all have the capability and the ability and the possibility to get up these hills if we just take them one by one, bit by bit, a couple of steps and minutes at a time, and that's going to allow you to get past it. The other thing I like to say is make sure you use the backside to recover. That is what you want to use this section for. You're going to stress your body really hard to get up the hill, then you're going to use that immediate side. As soon as you get to the top, you're going to use the backside to recover. And that's how you're going to get through this section. If you do not use the backside to recover, you're not going to be able to attack the next hill, right? The distance between these hills does vary. So you can see that second one, that's between the second and the third, there is a longer time to recover. Use that. That's a super key part. And then again, once you get up Heartbreak Hill, the fourth hill, you have a really nice long recovery, and I'm going to go into that in this next section. Here are some pictures of the hills and specifically Heartbreak Hill. One of the great parts about tackling these hills is there will be tons of people. So use the crowd, work the crowds to help you get through this section. Again, everybody's like suffering together, right? But the people on the side, the spectators, they desperately want you to have a good, enjoyable time, and they'll have funny signs. You can see some of those here. Newton has a huge banner that goes across the top of Heartbreak Hill. I love this because you can see it the entire time that you're going up, just waiting for this banner, and it says, congratulations on getting to the top of Heartbreak Hill. So like, it's something to celebrate there, just that moment. It's really, again, taking each thing as it comes bit by bit, breaking it down. Do not get overwhelmed. Just do one hill, recover, second hill, recover, and so on, right? Do not try to take them all in a giant chunk. It's overwhelming. All right, now we are on to Brookline and we are getting closer to Boston. The course has a huge downhill after Heartbreak, which is great. If you have paced the course and are having a good day, this is where you turn the jets on and you have a great day. This is where this happens. Your legs are going to be beat to a pulp by this point. I kind of went into that earlier, but again, you're going to have to utilize every single muscle group in 100 different ways to get through this race because it is so much up and down and at various points. You're never settled into anything. So your legs will feel it. Watch your footing as you turn at Cleveland Circle. There is another part where the train tracks cross the course, and I do have pictures of that so you could know where that is and make sure you're prepared for that. As Paul mentioned before, Boston College crowds are huge. They have a lot of energy. I think they rival Wellesley for sure. And they do kind of like stretch out to a bigger section. So that is something to look forward to there at the end of the race, or towards the end of the race, I should say. Here are some pictures of coming off the back of Heartbreak Hill. As I mentioned, there's this huge downhill, right? So you have this picture here on the right, the ladies, the pros with their wonderful form charging down the hill. You can see they are really taking full advantage of the downhill here. This is how I recommend you go down the backside of Heartbreak Hill. And then you have this other picture on the left for some, regular old folks, much like me and you, who are, not having the best form at this point in the course. And it's tough, right? Because you're at mile 22 here. So it is hard to have good form. But if you concentrate on good downhill form as you go through all of these downhills, you're going to come out a lot better in the end of this, right? And one of those things to do is to make sure you're not leaning back. So you can see that in this picture here as an example of don't do that. Here is this, what I mentioned before, when you're coming to Cleveland Circle, there are multiple train tracks and they're again crossing here in a diagonal and you are making a left turn. So you're coming downhill off the backside of Heartbreak. You're passing by the cemetery. You're passing by Boston College and this quiet Chestnut Hill Reservation. And then you're going to make a left at Cleveland Circle. This is where I can't tell you the number of people I've seen get tripped up here because you are now approaching mile 23 of the race and everybody has, your brain is sort of lost at this point, right? But please make sure you're picking up your feet as you cross these tracks and do notice they are crossing in various different twisting ways, right? All right. Brookline to Boston, 35K to 40K. This is that downhill that I mentioned. You get this big negative 3.4% right after you crest Heartbreak Hill. It feels steep, again, because you have been utilizing your muscles to go up for so long. It does feel like a dramatic turn. And then you have this overall downhill that goes all the way from mile 21 to 24. The sit-go sign does start to become visible, and this is one of those legends of the Boston Marathon, the sit-go sign, and that is because it is the sign that you're getting near the finish and you're getting very close to Boston proper itself. So that's very exciting. I always personally use the sign to draw me in. At this point, your brain is kind of not functioning properly anyway. So, using simple, basic things like just get myself to that sign is very helpful at that point of the race. This is what it looks like from the distance. As I said before, you can see it a long time before you get there. And then this is what it looks like when you get there. The other thing to know here is there will be 3 or 4 marathon photographers stationed here. And I have always made it a point to get a good photo with the sit-go sign in the background. That's what they're stationed there for. So if you ham it up, you can also have that, which is, you know, like it's just something to get you through these really tricky parts of the race. All right, we have made it to Boston. Very exciting. 40K to the end. There are 3 short climbs here, and they come at it's 20, you know, starting mile 25 to all the way up until that last like mile 26. There's still hills here, but they're small. So they are in this order: over the Mass Turnpike, under Massachusetts Ave, and then up Hereford to Boylston. I have pictures of what those look like. Again, it's just, you're gonna feel it so much at this point. After you make that turn onto Boylston, there's 600 meters until you get to the finish line. That's all there is. So a lot of people and everybody around you, crowd-wise and runner-wise, is going to hype you up for that last 600 meters. I think it's probably the best section of maybe any marathon in the entire world, at least that I've done. So that's one of those points where, again, you're just going to just enjoy it. Just enjoy every second of that. Here's going back to what those climbs look like. That first one over the Mass Turnpike is about 15 feet. To me personally, this is my hardest climb of the entire race. I don't know why exactly. It just feels really difficult. And it's only 15 feet. But then you have this climb that goes under Mass Ave, that's 10 feet. And then that little bit up Hereford is about 5 feet. So almost nothing at that
By the way,
point.
Kristen, when you're that first climb up going over the Mass Turnpike, the thing that I always do there is, if as you're crossing the turnpike underneath you, if you look to the right, you see Fenway Park. You can see Fenway. You can actually see the stadium and see inside of the stadium. And just past that is when you turn at Kenmore Square to the right, and you go under, not literally under, but below the sit-go sign. And shortly after that point is the 1 mile to go sign. There's a sign that says 1 mile to go. So to get me over that climb there at Mass Turnpike, I do those 3 things, which is, 1, I'm looking for Fenway, and then I make the turn, or I'm running straight towards the sit-go sign, and that's where the turn is at Kenmore Square. And I think just get to that sit-go sign. When I make the turn below the sit-go sign, I think now look for the 1 mile to go. That's what gets me through that. Still got these last 2 coming up, but for the first one, which I agree with you is really hard. That's my mental game right there.
I like that. I'll use that. Yeah, so these again, these numbers are small. We can all do this. We wouldn't even think twice about it, but it's just where it comes in the race. And again, your legs are pretty beat up by this point. So here's a pictures of what those look like. There is that one that I mentioned, that over the Mass Turnpike, and there you can see actually Fenway in this picture to the right side there. This is what the climb under Massachusetts Ave looks like. You go down, you have this downhill to go under that overpass, and then you have to go up the other side. And this is what it looks like up Hereford Street. So again, it's nothing really, but you feel it. Here is what Hereford looked like in 2018, where everybody was discarding their various rain protection to make sure they had a really nice finish line picture. Everybody wants to look good at the finish, right? And so they took all of their plastic bags and garbage bags and other things off at this point and tossed them onto the street. But then it ended up being really slippery because it was wet and raining. And of course, plastic that's wet is not good for running on. So make sure you watch your feet if there is bad weather, especially in this part here at the end. This is the most famous turn of the course, and it is one of those that is just hugely exciting. The crowds here will be, 6, 7 deep on the sidewalks, packed full. There's just a huge energy. Everybody knows when they make that turn, you'll be able to see the finish line all the way ahead of you. And it's a really dramatic moment. This is
Go
what
back
it
a
looks.
photo. Can you go
Yeah.
back one shot? You can see in the distance of the photo down the street, that's Hereford Street. You see that truck that has you see the white part of the truck in yellow. That's Commonwealth, where you just went under the Mass Avenue, right? That's Commonwealth Drive. So you'd make the right hand turn onto Hereford, and then the left hand turn onto Boylston. It's only 2 blocks long. It doesn't seem that long, but as Kristen mentioned, it's a minor climb, and the only thing, even though it is a climb, the thing that you tell yourself is just get to the turn onto Boylston Street, because once you make that turn, it really is one of the most exciting moments you'll feel in running a marathon, that left-hand turn onto Boylston Street.
Yes. So this is what that last bit looks like on Boylston up to the finish. As you can see, there's signs everywhere. There'll be flags. There'll be tons of people. And it's just an incredible energy. Really do savor this. There's not many experiences like this on Earth. So you should really, enjoy this, and also congratulate yourself for having gotten through a really hard race. All right, so now I'm going to give a couple of tips on overall general pacing and some numbers. This is, again, going into formulas if you want like numbers and calculations. This comes from Jack Daniels, which is he's a famous coach if you don't know. So every percent gradient of incline will slow you by 12 to 15 seconds per mile, while every percent gradient of decline will aid you by 8 seconds. The reason I put this in here, or one of the other reasons I put this in here, is just to point out the fact that it's not an equal. It's not a 1-to-1. So if you're going up and you're going down, that is not the same energy loss and spent and return on those, right? So please do keep that in mind as you're going along. You're not going to be able to get exactly back what you gave up on the front end of the climb. You should not. You should not even try. And this is from John Kellogg, and this is a different formula. And he says, for every 10 feet of elevation change, it alters your time by 1.74 seconds, regardless of horizontal distance covered. So again, these are just formulas and calculations you can use if you want to sort of ballpark what the number should be. But overall, the concept is this. As you're climbing, you're going to lose time. You're going to be slower, right? And as you're descending, you're going to be maybe a little bit faster. And then hopefully you end up with marathon pace at the end of all of these gains and descents. But overall, you really should let effort be your guide. And I do have a note here about conditions to say that we don't know what the conditions will be, but you should absolutely take conditions on the day into account when you're making a plan for what your numbers should be. So things that might alter effort and what your pace is. That would be an example, would be things like a giant headwind, or things like a very, very hot year. They've had Boston's where it was 80, 75, 80 degrees. Another example would be in 2018 where it was 30 and there was a driving rain that was, forcing, people into hypothermia quite literally that year. So again, all of these numbers and calculations, you can get very precise about what you should be, and people do this and they obsess over it, but none of us know what it's going to be on the day at the time until we get there or very close to it. So please do take all of this into mind. This here, I just wanted to show this. This is a graphic representation of the climbs and the descents. And the darker the color, the more drastic it is, right? So the climbs are red and the descents are green. The very dark green are the very sharp descents. So you can see where those are. The very dark red are the larger climbs, right? So you can see as a comparison from one half to the second half where those are coming at. And then also I want you to note that there's not very many points where it's not a color green or red, right? There's a lot of downs and ups in this course, which I brought up before. So again, let effort be your guide.
By the way, go back to that slide, Kristen, just to
Yes.
explain. People like me who aren't always great with numbers, but I know there's some math majors watching. What you're looking at the top left, it says 0.0. That's the start, the elevation at the start. At the bottom, it says 26.4. This was taken from some runners' actual measurements. So it's, they didn't run perfect tangents, didn't run 26.2, ran 26.4 miles. But it's every 10th of a mile. So looking again, top left, 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. That's what you're seeing here. So Kris is right that you could literally go a 10th of a mile and it changes from red to green and then back to green and back to red, right? And so this course is constantly up and down and up and down. And she's also correct that there are very few areas that are white. There's no elevation change.
Yes. So this is just a sample of runners who completed the course in 2017. This is all men 45 to 49 who all of them finished between 255 and 259. This is each dot represents what their pace was at each of those 5K points where the chip clocks your time, right? And so the point of this, again, is not to get into great detail about what you specifically, everybody's going to have their own strengths and weaknesses. Some people are going to go out a little bit faster. Some people are going to be able to climb a little bit better than other people, right? But overall, this gives a nice idea of what their paces were and how they varied from start to finish. And you can also draw some conclusions to say, this chart only represents from 603 to 821. And you can see at those far extremes, there's really not a lot of people that are in that range, right? So for a 255 to a 259, that overall pace is about 645 to 650-ish. And so you can see there was variation over and under that end pace, but not a lot, right? They're not varying it by multiple minutes to either side. We're talking about seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds here and there, right? So these are just examples to give you some ideas for how you want to approach the course. And you need to tailor it yourself, or maybe with myself or Paul, whoever your coach is, as to what your particular strengths and training have indicated.
The other thing that chart shows is that as a group, everybody slowed down. As a group, it slowed down.
Yes.
And I think that would be true of every age group and every finishing time. Each dot representing a different runner. As a group, they all slowed down, right? As a group. And that's true of this course, I think, across all paces and all genders and all ages.
Yes, and in fact, that's what this quote is basically saying, and that's the reason I put it in. That's the reason it comes next. And this is, again, overall sort of concept, right? There's a lot of downhill in the front half. There's a lot of climbing in the second half, and so it is really, really hard to have the second half with hundreds of feet of climbing to be faster than that first half. Some people can do it, but it is a very rare occurrence.
And that photo that's taken there, that's the Charles Gate Bridge. It's just past mile 25. So at this point, these runners have gone past the sit-go sign, past the 1 mile to go sign. They're literally inside less than a mile to go at this Charles Gate Bridge. And you see here a lot of walking, right? And it's not uncommon to see that here inside the last mile. It's this Boston This is a tough course. So if you find yourself walking under the Charles Gate Bridge to admire the artwork, join a club. I've done the same thing.
All right. It's back to Paul now, post-race.
Right. Okay, so again, to orient you here, you can see the finish line on the left. That's your finish line on Boylston Street, right by the Boston Public Library. And gear check straight ahead on the right at almost to Arlington Street. This doesn't look like very long, but it is a long walk. These city blocks are very long. First thing you come through is medical, and then water, and then blankets, and then food. So by the time you get all the way to the end there, inside that red circle on the right at gear check, you've walked a pretty good distance. One thing to keep in mind here is almost every year that I've done this, the temperature drops in this area. It's not your imagination because you just run a marathon and your body's cooling. It's very windy in here. And there are taller buildings casting some shade on the streets. And so it cools off in this area. So don't turn away the Mylar blankets that they offer you. Take the blanket, the volunteers will put it around you, they'll tape it around you, and you finish your way walking through here. The exits, there are 3 options. On the north side at Newberry Street, on the south side at Stewart Street, or on the on the west side over there closer to Copley Square. I'm not sure if that third exit's going to be open this year. It might be because of the construction that's happening over at Copley Square. Sometimes it's not circled here. What's that?
This map is from this year.
Yeah. Sometimes, by the way, sometimes it's not an official exit, but at the right past gear check over at Arlington Street, sometimes runners have made their way past gear check. They've changed their clothes. They're a little bit loopy and limping, and the security there will let you out at Arlington Street. I've gone out that exit at Arlington Street, but lately what I do is I go out at Newberry Street and exit there. There are family meeting areas. The family meeting areas. Oh, the T stations I forgot to mention. There are 2 of them nearby if you're taking the T. The Arlington station's the green one, and that's why if you can get out at Arlington Street, if they'll let you out, it's easy to just cross the street and you're at the T station. The Back Bay station is an orange line. Family meeting area. I don't recommend this for anybody. It's alphabetical. There are signs on the street, A, B, C, and so on, and it's where you're supposed to meet to your family, right? It's open to the public, but the public has to go through security to get in these areas. So there are these big crowds outside the family meeting area going through. They're checking bags. So they're checking bags to get into the area. And then, of course, there's lots of people milling around. So I don't recommend meeting your family. What I do recommend is meeting, and yes, there's an info booth if you need help. I would consider arranging with your family or your friends to meet them somewhere else away from the family meeting area. In the past, I've met my family at the entrance to the Weston Copley. That's one place to meet. Over on Newberry Street, where I typically met my wife when she's not running, she's running it this year, is at the exit of Newberry Street and the exit on Newberry Street. So I go north, meet her there right at that Newberry Street exit. Or, as I said, maybe the corner of Arlington and Boylston Street. Even if you exit on Newberry Street and walk a block east to Arlington Street, that's, by the way, where the Boston Common is, where you dropped off your or where you got on the buses earlier in the morning. So those are some ideas of places to meet.
That's
Closing with this, right? It says what it says.
I just like this quote, and this is the start line of the race. So, read this, take some inspiration, or don't, but the race is going to be here in 15 days, and it's the greatest race. You're going to have a great.
Nice thing about this photo, going back to that photo, the first couple of miles when we talked way long ago about how crowded it is, it's a 2-lane road just like this. And that wall-to-wall people is what you have for about the first 2 miles of the course, maybe 3 miles. And then it starts to open up a little bit. It really doesn't open up until you get to that Framingham train station, because it really is this crowded. And then on the next slide, at the finish line, it can be that crowded at the finish because obviously when this photo is taken, see how crowded it is. So be prepared to run with 30,000 of your closest friends on race day.